uh, the the sorry, just 1 second. It's an honor to be chairing this Blue Economy session of the Laurentic Forum. My name is Andrew Ward. I am joint CEO of Inishore Development Partnership. Primarily, we deal with rural development, and we deal in specifically with where I live in with coastal areas, and we manage a program called the LEADER program. The LEADER program is it's an EU-funded program, and it primarily deals with local communities looking after and trying to sort their own problems out. The idea is that you have a collection of agencies made up of the community, state agencies, and industry, and people come together from the bottom up and they collaborate, work together, you know, within Ireland as well and internationally as well in relation to cooperation. It fits very neatly into the Laurentic Forum. The Laurentic Forum is what I would call a bottom-up project. It started about 13 years ago when Don McNeill, together with others, started you know, a very simple ceremony for the loss of the Laurentic. It has grown over the last 13 years to what we have now, which is international collaboration across the Atlantic. My own history, I suppose, is I'm a fisherman originally. I fished for 22 years. I fished on different boats. I had my own boat. Then I had twins, and I went back to school, and I became, you know, I went into local development and rural development. In my time fishing, I would have been a founder member of Foyle Fishermen's Co-op, one of the biggest fishermen's co-ops here in Donegal. I would have spoken in the European Parliament on fisheries. I was very lucky in that I was a member of BIM, the Irish Sea Fishery Board. I was a member of the Lochs Agency, which is one of the bodies set up after the Good Friday Agreement, looking at waterways. And the minister, who will be coming here shortly, gave an invite to the Irish Local Development Network, which represents all the local development companies in Ireland. And I sat on lately on the task force looking at the effects of Brexit in the fishing industry. So my history is steeped in fishing industry and in coastal communities. I think this conference is very, very important because I think coastal communities are meeting challenges that they never have met before, that are really putting them to the pin of their collar, to use an Irish expression. And I think collectively we need help. It has always been said that a long time, you know, that the land divides us and that the water unites us. This conference is a great example of the water uniting us in a common purpose, which we can all work together on. And the blue economy is absolutely necessary in maintaining and sustaining the economy going forward. I know that our minister, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Mr. Charlie McConalogue, is due to speak here. I'm just not sure if he's here yet or not. I don't know if someone can.
Yeah, I'm here, Andrew, if you can hear me.
Oh, good, Charlie. That's Minister. That's great. I just want to say that the Minister McConalogue, not only is he the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, he also is the Minister with responsibility for the LEADER program, which we run, and he has been a great support to all in the coastal communities, and we're very privileged and lucky to have him on board. And without any more ado, I'd just like to welcome Charlie to the conference, Minister McConalogue to the conference. The problem is that Minister McConalogue is from the same town that I work in, and sometimes you end up using not the correct term. So I'd like to welcome Minister McConalogue to the conference and look forward to his few words. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Andrew, and good morning to everyone. And it's a pleasure to join with you. And thanks very much for the invitation to open the second morning of the Laurentic Forum on the value of the blue economy, sustainable growth and opportunity. And I want to recognise your role, Andrew, and all leader and all on the committee, and particularly as well, Donny and all of the team in relation to this year's conference, and indeed over the last number of years, from this being an initial idea to a forum of annual standing, which has been very meaningful, and from a national point of view, but also in terms of pulling people together internationally and collaboration, and ensuring that in terms of how we all interact with our seas, that as you pointed out yourself, Andrew, that they are something that bring us together. And as an island nation, we have a very special relationship with the sea. With a large proportion of our nation and our coastal communities in particular depending on our ocean wealth for their livelihoods, and that's particularly so the case in our own home county of Donegal. As we're well aware, the past 2 years of the global pandemic has added to the already significant challenge of climate change in terms of the sustainability of economies of our marine and indeed coastal communities. And as we now work to recover from those challenges, we must be resilient, innovative, and creative when it comes to reinvigorating our blue economy, both managing and protecting it for current and indeed for future generations. Across Ireland, we're very conscious of the need to deliver a thriving, sustainable maritime economy based on healthy and clean and productive marine ecosystems that also recognise the climate and biodiversity crisis as the defining challenge of our time as well. Our programme for government, called Our Shared Future, sets out a number of marine-related goals linked to biodiversity, climate and bioresources, as well as integrated policy and planning. And climate change is a major focus for the Irish government and globally, as you all know, and as we particularly see this week with the meeting and the work going on at COP26 in Glasgow. The oceans and the marine sector can and will play its part in dealing with impacts of climate change, including the challenge of our warming seas, acidification, loss of biodiversity, weather and storm surges. Ireland has outlined this commitment at this week's conference. We're a co-signatory to the Because the Ocean Declaration, which is a call for an ambitious ocean outcome at COP26. The declaration calls for the adoption of a COP26 decision, encouraging all parties to the UN Climate Convention to integrate ocean climate biodiversity linkages in their plans to implement the Paris Agreement, and also to recognise the need for more ambition on all sides to tackle climate change and protect the ocean. The future of our own marine sector and our coastal communities depends very much on the sustainable management of this precious resource within these parameters. The Irish government has had ambitious economic targets to develop our ocean wealth in the past decade, and our initial integrated marine plan, harnessing our ocean wealth, developed a cross-government approach in partnership with industry, which has significantly increased the focus of the value of our maritime and marine economy and public engagement as well with the seas and oceans. Under the current programme for government, the government will develop a new sustainable successor plan to maintain this momentum in terms of economic development while simultaneously protecting our marine resources. Our seafood sector is a key part of our overall national economy and valued at just over 1.1 billion last year. And as Minister with responsibility for fisheries, I'm working to address the significant challenges facing our seafood sector, and I'm committed to supporting this sector and the coastal communities that depend on it during the challenging time. And while not underestimating the challenges, I am confident that working together, we can find solutions that will support and develop our coastal communities in the years ahead. Our geographical advantage on the western fringe of the EU provides us with an advantage, providing the opportunity of using Ireland as a locus for research, technology, development, and innovation. In order to protect and develop a sustainable blue economy, Ireland is striving to become a leading centre for ocean knowledge and research. I know the conversations you will have today and tomorrow will contribute towards actions that will be identified and implemented under the EU's mission area to restore our ocean and waters to health by 2030. These actions will in turn feed into the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, signposting us towards the science we need for the oceans that we want. For coastal communities on all sides of the North Atlantic and into the Arctic, we recognise that dialogues with the citizens who live within these areas and who depend on it and who drive and provide the lifeblood to these areas, that is now more important than ever to ensure that the changes proposed and implemented are informed by science, have a positive impact on livelihoods while protecting the resource itself. The empowerment of citizens is integral to achieving the goals of the EU Green Deal for the fair transition towards a climate neutral and sustainable Europe. And that Green Deal states that no person or place should be left behind as the Union transforms into a modern, resource efficient and competitive economy. Unlocking investments and markets will be key now to promoting products from the blue economy. Specifically in the bioeconomy, consumers increasingly demand sustainable products where value chains are fully traceable and certified. And cluster initiatives such as those you'll hear about from today, from Donegal Blue Economy Marine Cluster and the Icelandic Ocean Cluster, will show us that in collaboration with research consortia, industry and state agencies, we can deliver sustainable seafood and strong, vibrant coastal and sustainable coastal economies. Collaboration and research are now more important than they've ever been as we continue to work together to understand and protect our valuable marine resource and ensure that its future sustainability. Stronger stakeholder networks, enhanced engagement and coherence will help to drive high quality blue jobs in our coastal communities and deliver a thriving blue economy while protecting the seas and oceans which it depends. So thanks again for the invitation to deliver these opening comments this morning. And thanks, Ian, in particular for the work that's ongoing by all of you participating in the Laurentic Forum over these couple of days. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you in my role as Minister for Fisheries and the Marine to bring forward our coastal communities to work internationally and to collaborate to ensure that we do ensure a sustainable approach to how we develop our coastal communities, to how we develop our fisheries, to how we develop the blue economy in a way that has the people living in our coastal areas at its core. So listen, thanks very much to everybody today and best wishes for a successful conference.
Thank you, Minister. On behalf of all at the Laurentic Forum, I would like to thank you very warmly for your encouraging words and for your actions, which is more important. And I note in particular putting sea fishery and fishery center in relation to the blue economy. The blue economy isn't in any way, it is an opportunity. It is in no way a threat to traditional fishing industries. It is an add-on. It is a way of making them sustainable going into the long term. And we look forward to working with you, Minister, and with indeed our partners in our joint effort across the Atlantic in trying to make sure that our coastal communities are vibrant and sustainable into the long term. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. At this stage, I would like to introduce you to one of our moderators, who is Charlotte Teresa Weber, who will, I think, will introduce the first panel. Over to you, Charlotte, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi and welcome everyone to the first session of the day. We're now entering the session, The Future is Blue. And first I would like to introduce myself. I will be the moderator for the session, and I am a researcher at Aquaplan NIBA based in Northern Norway, in Tromsø, Norway. And I have a background and PhD in natural resource management and work on issues related to sustainability. And I think the topic of the Laurentic Forum and sustaining coastal communities is also very dear to me, as I not only work on these issues in my research, but I also have actually chosen to live in a remote coastal community in the Arctic north of Norway. So it's an honor to be here today. And before we jump into our session, I will announce that we will get some visual inspiration through two videos that will be shown now, where we can sort of have a look at the beautiful landscape of Northern Norway and also Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. So I hope Krista can start our videos now.
today. I chirp with joy like a cricket song. I am gray today. Gloomy and damp like a morning fog. I am orange today. Loud and messy like finger paint on the wall. I am yellow today. I shine my light out like the sun. I am white today. Soft and quiet like new snow. I am blue today. Calm as glass and cool like the sea. I'm a rainbow today. All the colors of the world. I'm a rainbow today. All the colors of the world. I'm a rainbow today. All the colors of the world are in me. All the colors of the world.
Newfoundland and Labrador.
It's calling me like the rainbow. It's calling me like the rainbow. The rainbow. One day soon. One day soon. One day soon.
Yes, thank you for these nice visuals to get us thinking about these regions. So now we will get started with our session on The Future is Blue. And in this session, we will look into the value of the blue economy and in particular, the social and economic impacts on the sustainability of our coastal communities. And for this, we will have 5 speakers today from Norway, Canada, Ireland, and Iceland. We will have Sunniva Løviknes from the Troms and Finnmark County Council from Norway, together with Bente Olsen Husby, who's from the West Finnmark Council. And then Iris Patton will follow. She is the president of the Portagrave Historical Society from Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. Then we will move back to Europe with Carl Bonner, who is the manager of the Donegal Blue Economy Marine Cluster in Ireland. And then our last speaker of the session will be Svein Agnason, who is a professor at the University of Iceland at the School of Business in Reykjavik in Iceland. Now with this, we are almost ready to start. Just some very brief housekeeping items to remember for our speakers as well as our audience. Each speaker will have 10 minutes, so I hope that we all can stick to our given time, as we want to make sure everyone has equal speaking time and we have some time for questions. There will be a Q&A and a panel discussion at the end of the session, so after our 4 presentations. And participants who are listening in and joining us here today, they can use the chat function, like I see some of you have already been doing, for general conversation. But we would like to ask you to use the Q&A function to ask questions to the speakers. And also, just to briefly mention, there will be a short survey at the end of the session that will appear and pop up on your browser once the session is done. And we would really appreciate your feedback so we can work on improvements in the future. Yes, thank you. This is it for me. So with this, I would like to hand over to our first speaker, and that is Sunniva Løviknes from Troms and Finnmark County Council in Norway. Sunniva, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, my name is, as you said, Sunniva Laviknes, and I work for the Troms and Finnmark County Council as an advisor in fisheries and aquaculture. And Troms and Finnmark is located in northern Norway together with Nordland County. I'm going to be talking about the blue fairy tale in the north. Next slide. The northern Norway is or Troms and Finnmark is Norway's largest seafood region. It exports seafood for 22.5 billion Norwegian kroners, resulting in 8.9 daily seafood meals. Next. Next slide. Yeah. And yeah, Norway has a really rich history of fish farming, and aquaculture has in a short time gone from being an experimental attempt in the late 60s to the billion-dollar industry it is today. However, it did start later in the north compared to other regions due to the harsher climate and the focus on fisheries. But it has now become the biggest fairy tale in the north, where today about 300 metric tons of salmon worth 13.6 billion Norwegian kroners are produced in Troms and Finnmark alone. There's also a great potential for further growth in the north, as there's still room for expansion and a good environment for aquaculture, even with the rising ocean temperatures that we see today. And fisheries make up a traditional industry in Norway, especially with cod. We have exported cod for more than 1,000 years. Both fisheries and the fish trade has shaped the daily life and history along the coast of the north. The Norwegian fisheries struggled with overfishing earlier, as most countries did, and in the 80s, the cod stocks were severely depleted. However, the cod has since returned to our coast and are today successfully managed. The stocks have multiplied with several record-breaking year classes, and coastal cod fisheries are still of a great importance to the north. Next, yeah. And then the king crab, which is a new arrival which came to the north in the late 70s, expanding westwards from Murmansk. It is defined as an invasive species that negatively impacts the ecosystem, and it goes further into the west and south of the Norwegian coast. It's currently spreading. And today it is found off the coast of Finnmark and Troms. And one of the things the Norwegian government has done to fight this invasive species and to compensate the fishers it has affected is to set a quota for it in the areas most affected. And the total allowable catches for 2020 amounted to 1,361 tons divided between 710 vessels. And these prices have had a pretty unique upswing at 1,000 Norwegian kroners per crab, resulting in a highly lucrative business. And in summary, the blue fairy tale in the north has created growth and extensive changes, which is something Bente Olsen Husby will tell you more about, and how that affected her hometown of Hasvik. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sunniva, and thank you for the invitation to participate. My name is Bente Husby. I grew up in Hasvik, a small fishing community on the island Sørøya in Finnmark, above the Arctic Circle in northern Norway. If you could change the slide, Krista. Yeah. There are approximately 1,000 inhabitants on the island. I have a Master of Fishery Sciences from the University of Tromsø. After being a student in Tromsø and in Tokyo, Japan, plus some years working in different cities in Finnmark, I finally settled down in Hasvik 16 years ago. Here I live with my husband and our 3 boys, aged 9, 11, and 15. I made the choice that I hope many young people from the districts will make when they decide where they want to settle down and raise their children. If you could switch forward, Krista.
Bente, I just want to let you know that we can't see you. Maybe move your camera down just a touch.
You can't see me?
Well, we can see you, but I think the camera is
Okay.
pointed more towards your ceiling.
Yeah, no, but you are.
That's
yeah,
better.
there you
That's
are.
better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, if you could switch the slide, Krista. Thank you. I'm now going to tell you the story of Hasvik, which is one of many fishery-based municipalities along the coast in Norway. Until the late 60s and early 70s, traditional fishing activities was combined with small-sized agriculture, named fiskerbonde in Norwegian. It's a combination of fisher and farmer. Beginning in the late 60s, the governing powers decided that trawlers that was not owned by fishermen or fisherwomen would be assigned with fishing quotas as long as they committed to deliver to the local fishing industry for processing. The large amount of fish and prawns that was brought ashore resulted in the establishing of 3 big fish factories in Husvik municipality in the early 80s. 2 of them produced fillet and conventional products such as dry fish and salt fish, and one of them were a prawn factory. After several periods with economic crisis, one large business group, HRC Products, had acquired all 3 factories by the end of the 90s. In 2002, without any advance notice, HRC Product was filed for bankruptcy. From one day to the next, we rose up to a 25% unemployment rate. The community was in a state of shock. The municipality of Husvik immediately started to discuss how and with which type of businesses we could substitute the lost jobs. The Norwegian government offered the municipality to take place in a development program with focus on conversion. The municipality accepted, but insisted to be named a development community instead. For why convert from the blue economy when this is a natural advantage that is impossible to copy? The government agreed. This focus point resulted in the developing of new fish factories that produces a broader range of products, including more niche products. It also made us aware of the importance of having a more differentiated composition of businesses. This has resulted in establishing activities in aquaculture, both salmon in the sea and facilities for breeding smolt on land. And least but not last, building up a whole new business around fishing tourism. Sørøya is now well known among fishing tourists all over the world as the land of the big fish. We possess several official world records of fish caught by rod. For example, the record of a 47-kilo North Atlantic cod from 2013. The big fishes that we are able to catch around Sørøya is not possible to imitate, giving this type of business a huge competitive advantage being located up here in the north. So what are the impacts on the local society given the changes that has taken place over the last 20 years? If you could switch foil, Krista. We now have many jobs to offer, but a great lack of labor. As you can see, we have had a reduction of more than 200 residents from 2001 until today, a reduction of 17%. From 2010, we experienced an increased immigration of people from Eastern Europe, taking part in the new businesses. This made a turn in the population decline. The largest groups are people from Lithuania and Poland. Many of the immigrants have settled down and invested in houses, fishing boats, and so on. The immigration has paused due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which immediately made a decline in the population. Husvik municipality is now more than ever a community with an international approach. 90% of our customers, guests, and partners are from other countries than Norway, and our products and service production are valued to more than 1 billion Norwegian crowns. Given the above, it's not a drawback that we have inhabitants from 28 different countries from all parts of the world. I think the government's top priority should be to assist the northern regions in overcoming the Arctic paradox, that is, changing a demographic trend that is inversely correlated with economic growth. A stable demographic development is a necessary precondition for development and security in the different regions. The most important means of meeting regional challenges in the district areas is by making use of the large natural resources in the region's reductions, including the blue economy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much to both of you, Sunniva and Bente. Now, after we heard some experiences from Norway, we're moving over to Canada with Iris Pettin. So I welcome our next speaker, Iris. She is the president of the Portagrave Historical Society in Newfoundland. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. The Portagrave Peninsula, the Portagrave Peninsula is one of the most prosperous fishing communities within the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. The snow crab fishery started in the area around the late 1960s and have contributed to the viability of the community. The Portagrave Peninsula Heritage Society envisions using the crab snow fishery as a sustainable tourism attraction to leverage the funds to preserve the history of the area and to create economic growth, as well as to ensure the snow crab fishery will continue as we learn and teach others about the importance of the oceans and the health of the resource. The Portagrave Peninsula was incorporated in 1993. They're a registered charitable organization. We have our own constitution, bylaws, and procedural manual. The governance is vested within the board of directors. Currently, we have 14 directors, and a membership is a requirement. Next slide. We developed a tourism master development plan. And so we went to the community for the feedback, and we welcomed the insights on ideas and businesses focused on our unique landscape, history, creativity, and people. We engaged Pat Corrin and Associates and Butland Communications to recommend a plan for tourism. And I've noticed that in the chat, we've already heard from Pat this morning. So we ended up with an approximate 100-page document. This was like a guidebook for us going into the future. So it included such topics as visitor experience development, marine and heritage fishery interpretation, the Ibsol Lears Cove heritage, the arbor experience, and a modern fishing experience. And it included natural and cultural experiences. So we used the theme of following the light. Whether it is the spiritual light of the church, the navigation light of the Greenpoint Lighthouse, the crab pot Christmas tree, the vibrant people, or the joy and lights of the colorful boats. Next slide. The Portagrave Peninsula, this is our website, and I would encourage you to take a few minutes to view our website. Most of the slides I'm using today came from that particular site. Next. Slide. The peninsula itself is the Portagrave Peninsula Heritage Society. We are preserving our heritage and our culture. So we're using a tourism logo to reflect the current reality of the way business is done now, whether it's GR codes or chips. Didn't want to be when we started out. One of the things was really important to it. Is that we didn't want to be someone else or copy another community, but we wanted to be ourselves. We are known for our accent, our dialect, hard work, and creativity. So one of the things that have been our success is that we've been managing some really great partnerships. We have a partnership with the Coast Guard alumni, with Parks Canada, with DFO, with the Marine Institute. So it's important for us to have sustainable experiences and that we use our crab fishery because it's important to us and it's where it's all started. And we're looking at for fundraising for the leveraging of our funds and a buy-in from the community. And we also really believe in sometimes is that if you build it, they'll come as well and we'll enjoy it. Next slide. Last year, we were recognized with the Manning Award from the Historical Sites Association in the provincial category for our Master Plan of Consolidated Heritage Initiatives, a project of the Portagrave Peninsula Heritage Society. The plan involves all major historic assets and how to protect and preserve these assets, allowing the Portagrave Peninsula to become the oldest and the most active fishing port in Newfoundland and Labrador. And this was our second time in as many years receiving this award. Next slide. In 2008, we ended up with a renewed focus with new directors. I became involved as my dad, who is now 86 years old, is an active director, and it gave me a chance to spend some time with him. I have spent my whole life and career into the fishing industry, so it gave me an opportunity to learn more about from my past. This is an aerial shot of the Greenpoint Lighthouse, and it's really important on understanding of the environment around the Greenpoint Lighthouse. The next slide. Don't you just love the comment that is on this one? A sturdy cast iron guardian, the Greenpoint Lighthouse has stood for almost a century and a half. And you can drive directly to this site, and we have the lands around, we have 18.5 hectares of land that is preserved around this area, so that will be no development, and we'll be able to preserve the area. So when the area was first settled over 400 years ago, the ocean beyond the lighthouse was the fishing grounds of the early settlers. Next slide. This is our really important area for us, the Arbors and Coves. The Portagrave Arbor has approximately 57 recreational boats, 74 fishing vessels, 11 processing companies that buy product, and 18 service companies. I did an estimate of the snow crab fishery alone in 2021 as a gross landing value of approximately $34 million from just this one landing port alone. Next slide. This cluster of buildings and area tell the story of our early settlement, and you can see the colorful and the beautiful landscape. Next slide. And of course, this collection was donated by the local residents, and of course, it is an area to preserve the history. So we certainly would love you to have an opportunity to take advantage of going through this collection. Next slide. And the Ibsol School, this was a one-room schoolhouse. And of course, this place holds many memories for the locals. And of course, we have a number of the books from back there as well, and a number of photographs, which are quite enjoyable to look through. Next slide. Of course, this was a typical family home around the turn of the century, and we've got it back in the way it was. Next slide. With the experiences of concentrating on our plan, on the aftermath of COVID, what we're realizing is that what people are looking for in tourism is simple pleasures in life. They want fresh air. They want the feeling of peace and tranquility. They want the sounds of the sea, and they like to see a productive life. And of course, a lot of this is doing this together as a family. Next slide. This is one of the experiences that we're offering, and it's learn about our history through a lesson on how to row or scull, which is a single oar through the back of the boat. And this was the technology used in our history to get to the fishing grounds. So you can rent for an hour, ask lots of questions, and definitely have fun. Next slide. We would like to develop an ecotourism using the seafood landed in the harbor for a culinary experience. We've now finishing a project of an interactive map developed using GR code that will tell the stories of areas where visitors can picnic in the area. Next slide. We have a Portagrave-based manufacturer and supplier of commercial snow crab pots. With the manufacturing process located in Portagrave, there is an opportunity for the visitor to engage in the full cycle of the modern crab fishery, from understanding and participating in the fabrication of the pot and associated techniques, including mending twine, knot tying and rope, through to setting the pot, harvesting crab and handling on board, shore-based support services and offloading, through to a culinary experience of food preparation and dining. The experience is scalable and might consist of simply a tour of the manufacturing facility right after constructing an actual crab pot. An active engagement in the harvest. The approach might include the visitor's pot being assigned a chip and then being able to be assigned to a commercial fish harvester, giving a record of its activity tracked and for a day or for a season, and then sent to the visitor. We feel this experience will fit perfectly within the blue economy concept. Next slide. Christmas in the Harbour, now in its 23rd year. All the vessel owners decorate their boats for the Christmas season. Last year, we had record numbers of visitors. It was an activity for entire families to come and visit. And of course, it is one of the few winter tourism activities within the province. Next slide. 2020, last year, we ended up constructing the largest crab pot Christmas tree in Atlantic Canada. With over 475 snow crab pots, a typical boatload of pots brought to the crab grounds at the beginning of the crab season. The crab pots and decorative fishing gear are owned by the local fishermen and manufacturers and shared for the enjoyment of our local area and the tourists. And of course, it became a magical event. Next slide. This concludes my presentation, but we would love for you to come and visit our beautiful area. Follow the light as we embark on growing the blue economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Iris. This was lovely. Some great visuals of this lovely area in Canada. Now we're moving over to Ireland with our next speaker, Carl Bonner, who is the manager at the Donegal Blue Economy Marine Cluster. The floor is yours, Carl.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that. So good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like just take the opportunity to thank Dawn O'Neill and the committee members just for the invitation to participate in the 13th annual Laurentic Forum Conference. And I would also just like to acknowledge all the hard work and dedication for those involved, of which has developed the Laurentic Forum into what has now become an exciting, unique and internationally recognized conference. Next slide there. So I can actually stay on that slide, sorry. So just again to introduce myself. So my name's Carl Bonner, as was mentioned, and I am the cluster manager for the Killybegs Marine Cluster. So my own background is within the seafood industry, having spent the last 20 years working in the private sector. So the Killybegs Marine Cluster is Ireland's only dedicated blue economy marine cluster. The Killybegs Harbour Centre is located in County Donegal, and it's on the northwest coast of Ireland. Its position is at the tip of a deep fjord-like inlet, which makes it one of the safest, most sheltered deepwater harbours on the west coast of Ireland. So during my short presentation this afternoon, I aim to highlight the social and economic impact of the blue economy in Killybegs and another significant port, Greencastle Fishing Port, also in County Donegal. Next slide there, please. So since its inception, the Laurentic Forum back in 2006, it has attracted and established international partners on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So these international partners include Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador Province, Ireland, obviously myself representing Ireland, Iceland and our friends in North Norway. So the forum's success has largely been a credit to the adherence and strong ethos and the application using a quadruple helix or philosophy by engaging with the four main sectors of society, which include education, both the public and private sector, as well as the community sectors. So the forum also presents key opportunities to discover and develop potential collaborative projects through EU funding opportunities, such as the Atlantic Area Fund, the Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme, LEADER, as was mentioned earlier, and ACONA in Canada. Next slide there, please. So just to give some context, Killybegs is one of 6 fishery harbour centres in Ireland. And just moving around the coast of Ireland, the other 5 fishery harbour centres include Howth on the east coast, Dunmore East, Castletown Bear, Dingle and Rossavale. And then, as mentioned, within Donegal there are 2 significant fishing ports, Killybegs and Greencastle, which together contribute significantly to their local economies. So these 6 fishery harbour centres are regulated, maintained and managed by the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. So the principal functions of this division within the department are in the areas of sea fishing or sea fishing, boat licensing, registration and the management and development of the fishery harbour, as well as coastal protection. So Donegal, in the case of Killybegs and Greencastle in particular, we're very fortunate to have a minister for the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine as Minister Charlie McConlogue, who opened the floor this afternoon. So delighted to have his support. So next slide there, please. I suppose it's almost impossible to talk about the social and economic impact of the blue economy, particularly in Killybegs and Greencastle, without first acknowledging and including the impact Brexit has had on our fishing industries. So the impact and the direct implication following Brexit for fisheries has been quite catastrophic, particularly for the seafood sector in Killybegs, which accounts for 82% of the economic activity in Killybegs. The disproportionate burden share, which has resulted in Ireland transferring 40 million out of the EU transfer of 184 million to the UK. And mackerel represents 26 out of this 40 million, which results in Donegal being the most negatively affected county, with 84% loss in tonnage and 70% loss in overall value. The loss of the 26 million or mackerel quotas is extremely concerning for the dedicated mackerel fishery, which is established in Killybegs, and they have grave concerns, obviously, about the future of that industry. So in an ever-changing world, the global export landscape was also significant and negatively impacted by COVID, which caused considerable disruption and uncertainty to export markets as well. Next slide there, please. So just taking a sort of a deeper dive to Killybegs and Greencastle, I would like to provide some context and stats on both Killybegs and Greencastle, just in terms of their social and economic contribution to their local economies. And I'd also just like to acknowledge that this data is from the most recent reports provided by Board Ishkawara, or BIM, the Seafood Board. So the seafood sector in Killybegs employs 2,133 full-time equivalents, providing 1,006 direct employment, and that's broken down into 378 from fishing, 146 from aquaculture, 482 from processing, and the remaining balance of 1,127 from downstream. And then in Killybegs, the main fish processing is the main driver of the seafood economy. Killybegs have the highest multiplier for employment, which effectively means that for every float 4 employed within the seafood sector, 3 are employed downstream. And in the wider Killybegs hinterland, the seafood economy accounts for 29% of all economic activity and a massive 45% of all employment. The seafood sector in Greencastle employs 488 full-time equivalents, 330 directly, and the breakup is 202 from fishing, 67 from aquaculture, 61 from processing, and the balance of 158 downstream. And then in Greencastle, fishing is the main driver of the seafood economy. And in the wider hinterland, the seafood economy accounts for 11% of the economic activity and 13% of the employment. Next slide, please. So it's evident, obviously, from both Killybegs and Greencastle are key to the sustainability and future of their local economies, which is underpinned by the success achieved to date within the fishing industries and other marine-related ancillary industries. So my next 3 slides provide an overview of both Killybegs and Greencastle in terms of their local economies, and in terms of their gross value added contribution, their employment by the industry sectors, and then the origins of the workforce. So in terms of the gross value added contribution, unsurprisingly, the seafood sector forms a significant component of Killybegs' economy. And this data that Killybegs economy has made a gross value add contribution to the GDP of 555 million in 2018. And it's estimated that the port's seafood sector represented 94 million of this GVA total. Seafood therefore represents 17% of the local port economy and is the third largest sector behind manufacturing, mining and utilities. Next slide, please. So in employment terms, seafood is even more important within the port economy. So combined commercial fishing, aquaculture and fish processing, it is estimated that 21% of the workforce employment in the port area in 2018. And furthermore, fishing and aquaculture present nearly all of the local aquaculture, forestry and fishing related employment, and fish processing accounted for 40% of local manufacturing, mining and utility jobs. Next slide, please. So a recent study or survey rather from BIM, the results are overwhelming majority of the seafood employees, 80% originate from the wider port area in Killybegs. In Greencastle, 66% of the seafood employees originate from the wider Greencastle hinterland. This is notably higher than the survey's average across all the ports, which suggested that 63% of seafood employment jobs were filled by local people. Only in Kilmore Quay had a larger share of seafood jobs taken by people from the port area. A further 10% of seafood employee jobs were taken by people from the wider county, while 5% were filled from people outside the rest of Ireland. And interestingly, 5% of workers were from the EU, with a further 1% from just outside the EU. Next slide, please. So just to talk briefly about Killybegs Marine Cluster. So this is Ireland's dedicated marine cluster. So who are we? Well, the Killybegs Marine Cluster, it's Ireland's dedicated blue economy marine cluster. So we're a business-led cluster focused on developing and promoting the blue economy marine industries in southwest Donegal. We're one of 12 on the island, and we're 100% funded under the Regional Technology Cluster Fund and part of Enterprise Ireland's national clustering programme. And the key objectives for the cluster is to focus on new business development, fostering talent and skills, providing access to research and development while building a community established on a culture of trust. Next slide, please. So that is the ecosystem which makes up the blue economy in Killybegs, and there's effectively 7 industries or identifiable industries within that. Commercial fishing being the base industry, fish processing, marine engineering, aquaculture, renewable energies, offshore marine services and marine tourism. And it's export-led cluster with 95% of the turnover generated from export markets. Next slide, please. And just finally, it's a very unique ecosystem. So there's really 3 USPs, if you like. So Killybegs, in terms of their geographical location, provides access to the richest fishing grounds in Europe, but they also have access to the highest and most sustained wind speeds in Europe. They also possess a very rich maritime history, which has resulted in a very agile, talented and skilled workforce. And the cluster members itself are very unique. So they're in a very condensed area, so just 1 square kilometre apart, which makes Killybegs a very attractive and unique place to do business. Next slide, please. And then finally, I would just like to conclude by thanking you all very much for your time and attention. And thanks again to all involved in the Laurentic Forum for providing a unique opportunity for myself and obviously all the other speakers. And thanks for the Minister's time this morning as well. And if you wish to get in touch, you can do so by visiting the website, which is just www.kmc.killybegsmarinecluster.blue. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. With this, we will now move on to our last speaker of this session. And here I'd like to present Svein Agnason, who is a professor at the University of Iceland at the School of Business. Svein, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good morning, everyone. I suppose it's still morning in Newfoundland. It's the afternoon here on the other side of the pond. I'm going to give you a little overview of the blue economy in Iceland, and I know a colleague of mine will be talking about the ocean cluster later on today, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of a bird's eye view. So this is from a harbor in the northeast of Iceland called Borgarfjörður Eystra. And if you now have the first slide, please. So this is a picture that gives you an idea of the national importance of the fisheries and aquaculture of late. So you can see here at the top, you see the percentage of GDP, and it's roughly around something like 6-7% at the moment, the direct contribution to gross domestic production. But it is much higher if you take into account all the direct and indirect linked production in the country. And as you can see here, there was an increase in harvesting and processing as a percentage of GDP immediately after the great crisis of 2008, and then we have seen a decline of the importance of the fishery sectors as other sectors of the economy have started to rebound. In this picture, I have the employment. There's a huge drop here, but note that this is on 2 data series that I merged together. But what we can see now is that about 4% of the population currently works in the fisheries and aquaculture. And what we do have is that in the big news in Iceland in the past few years, in the past decade or so, has been the rise of aquaculture. We used to have aquaculture, which was around 5,000 tons per year. But now in the last decade, we have seen Norwegian firms investing in Icelandic aquaculture, primarily salmon. And the salmon farmers, they have grown tremendously, and you can see the increase here, and we expect this to continue in the next few years, as I will mention. I think the harvest this year will be more than 40,000 tons, and as you can see, there were only about 4,000 or 5,000 tons some 5-6 years ago. So there's been a magnificent increase in salmon in salmon aquaculture in the last few years. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so behind this, we have catches of fish, of course. And we have, on one side, we have the demersal species, and then we have the pelagic species. Now, the demersal species are primarily caught, which is the blue line here. And then I've lumped the main species, the haddock, saithe, and redfish, together in the other demersals. So, some others as well. But you can see what's been happening here is that we had a decline in the caught stocks, but at the same time we were lucky enough that Mother Nature smiled at us, and we had an increased abundance of haddock and saithe during that same time, which took a little bit of the slack. And then since about 2007, we have seen the caught stock increase again, and the future is quite bright. So in total, we have 450,000-500,000 demersal catches throughout the last 30 years or so. And this is quite steady. And this gives us a steady supply of whitefish, and all indications are that this will remain quite stable. There's much more variation in the pelagic species. This line here is the capelin, which is fluctuating wildly, 1.3 million tons in 1 year, and now in the last 2 years there was hardly any fisheries at all. And this year there will be some fishing allowed. The big news in the last few years has been the emergence of the mackerel, with the abundance in the oceans around Iceland increasing as the stock has been migrating further west and north. And also we have a steady harvest of herring, and that has given the pelagic industry a lot of stability. Another thing that has been happening in the pelagic industry has been this development towards processing all catches for human consumption. So all mackerel, I think almost all herring is currently for human consumption, blue whiting and capelin still for fish meal and oil. Give me the next slide, please. So there is a lot of difference in Iceland of the regional importance of the fisheries. This is the capital area where you can see that fisheries don't really matter that much. But in some places, like for instance, the West Fjords, you have 35% of the production in the area associated with harvesting and processing. And in many other places in Iceland, it's 20-25%. Used to be, it does fluctuate a little bit, but you can see here 20%, 15%. So it's quite important to remember that the regional importance of the fisheries in Iceland is still very, very high. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so what we do have developing in Iceland in the last few, 30, 40 years has been this mutual dependency and competitiveness. In Iceland, in the fisheries, we have a rather long horizon. Management of stock is based on long-term sustainability, and management of harvesting is also based on ITQs. And both the management of the stocks and harvesting are therefore inclined to take a longer view of the fisheries. The Icelandic firms have grown large because of the ITQ. There's been lots of concentration, and they are vertically integrated. And this concentration has not only appeared in harvesting, but also we've seen it taking place in processing. So we have large production centers in both the demersal and pelagic fisheries. In addition to this, we have domestic wet fish auctions, which have non-government prices, where it's simply a question of supply and demand, and the market prices there are in a sense unfiltered. And we can see that the changes in prices in the domestic markets, they depend on the changes of prices in the markets in foreign markets like in Europe, although of course the level of prices is different. But what this implies is that these large fishing firms, they have now a steady stream of supply of first-class raw materials, harvests, and then they can use the auctions to either buy or sell fish that they will not be processing themselves. And the large firms, they are profitable. And that means that they do have funds to engage in the development of technology. And Icelandic firms, the fisheries in Iceland are international fisheries. So we are market driven. And almost 99% of our catches are exported. So they're exported primarily to Europe and to America. And there we are facing very, very hard international competition. And these firms, they need to somehow create an edge in that market. And they do that by constantly pushing the barrier, by constantly making use of the latest technology being developed by firms primarily here in Iceland. And so the fisheries firms, they need access to latest technology, latest gear, latest equipment to compete in international markets, whereas the technology firms, those involved in marine technology, they need partners in the fisheries because they need access to those that are using their products to find out what is working, what is not working, what needs to be improved. And above all, they need also a steady supply of raw material so that they can help develop the equipment and technology used by the fisheries firms. So both is the mutual dependency that we have seen developed. And it's also an extremely fertile environment for innovation and technical development. Can I have the next slides, please? So the regional importance of Iceland can be seen of these demersal and pelagic processing and aquaculture can be seen here. The capital of Iceland, Reykjavik, is around here. Hope you can see this on your screen. And the capital region would be about this slice here. So it's about an hour's drive from the capital. 2/3 of the population, 3/4, they live around here. But you can see that we have seen demersal processing not just developing in the capital region, but also in other places. So we have seen it developing out in the west, here, in the north, even down here and further here. And we have seen in Westman Islands, pelagic processing is taking place in the east of the country, primarily these two locations, but also here in the Westman Islands. And the new addition, aquaculture, has developed centers for the marine aquaculture in the west of Iceland and in the east, and then we have land-based facilities here, up and down here. So the regional importance, in some places we have seen aquaculture centers developing in areas where we had fisheries before, but we have seen that sort of disappearing. Can I have the next slides, please? So what will happen in the future? We believe that this is the innovation and technology in 2018, and you can see there are a number of jobs in the industry is quite high, especially in equipment technology. But there are all kinds of firms developing in Iceland in the last few years. And let me just slip to the next slide, please. Because what we do believe will happen in the years to come is that we see harvesting and processing, that's those two slices here. But aquaculture will be increasing in importance. And we have algae, macroalgae, biotechnology, marine technology. These branches will all grow very, very fast in the future. What kind of firms might we then be talking about? Just give me the next slide, please. I have two examples here of firms that could be developing. This is Kerecis in the north, in the northwest of Iceland. They are pioneering the use of fish skin and fatty acids in cellular therapy and regenerative tissue marketing. They are based in Iceland, but they are also based in Arlington, in Zurich, and they are privately held, Icelandic, American, British, and French shareholders. They have 140 employees at the moment, and they are using the supply that comes out of these large factories and fish processing centers in Iceland. And the other example is Guinness in the north of Iceland, established in 2005. They have therapeutic chitin derivatives derived processed from shrimp shells. And again, a small firm, high-paying jobs, novel technology, and they are trying to find a niche in international markets. This is Icelandic owned. And how will these firms end? Well, if you give me the next slide, here we have a world leader today, Marel, which was founded in 1983, innovator in onboard weighing technology. It now has offices in more than 30 countries, 100 partners, 7,000 employees. Perhaps one of those two will end precisely like Marel. And the final slide, please. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you so much, Svein. That was very informative. We learned a lot about the Icelandic fishing industry today. So with this, we're now moving into our interactive panel discussion and Q&A. So I would encourage everyone in the audience, if you do have any more questions, then please post them in our Q&A box. Now, I invite the speakers. We have already received some questions. The first one goes to Iris. Gordon Cook says that those are lovely community assets and treasures that you presented, and he is interested to know if you could say something about the funding and the revenue generation side of those museums and sites that you presented.
Thank you, Gordon, for the question. I guess what we do is we charge for the experiences, and the other thing we do is we actively fundraise. For example, last year we raised approximately around $20,000 on the sponsorship of the crab pot Christmas tree. So we had businesses and people who, because we're a charitable registered organization. And of course, we've had a lot of success with the funding agencies of working on our business plans and making sure it's sustainable. And one of the goals that we want to do, and we're encouraging, is that we want other businesses to start in the community and in the area. And of course, that will be bringing tourists to help pay for these initiatives. So we just see it as an economic driver of being able, we can deal with it. So we've been looking at it with, I guess, maybe a business mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. There is another question from Gordon, even though he thinks it has been partly answered. This one goes to Svein. I will still ask you, Svein. This is based on your one bar chart. And Gordon is asking, what are your expectations about the size of the commercial fishery and or aquaculture, especially in terms of the Icelandic rural employment versus the total revenue and catch? If you think about this within a decade or so, do you expect it to be rather steady, slipping slowly, or falling?
The important thing to notice about Iceland's fisheries is that we are kind of limited by the abundance of fish found in the ocean. So we don't expect any large changes in demersal fisheries or the pelagic fisheries. So we are going to have to make the more out of what we have. In essence, that means that we must utilize the raw material better. We must be able to find more valuable products. And we must also, and in order to do that, we may have to introduce more technology. And technology often saves jobs. So in a sense, we would expect jobs to decline a little bit in the traditional processing industry, and we don't think that there will be new jobs in the harvesting industry at all. I mean, that would be possibly the same thing happening there, fewer boats and fewer fishermen. But what we do believe will take place is that even though jobs in the harvesting and processing industry may not be increasing at all in the next decades, we could have increases in jobs in byproducts, and we could also have increase of jobs in aquaculture. Now that is where we are going to see a lot happening in the next decade. We think aquaculture will grow from possibly 50,000 tons to more than 100,000 tons. It could easily go up to that. And even greater, even higher if we have success with the land-based facilities which are now being planned and built. So we could see some jobs being created in aquaculture, and most of those jobs will be in rural areas. We could also see new jobs being created in the marine technology field. Now, some of those firms are located outside the capital region because for many of them it is of greater importance to be close to the processing facilities where the raw material is created that is necessary for their production than to be close to the capital area. And this will also mean that the kind of jobs being created through these blue revolution will be different. There will be possibly not so many low-skilled jobs in the marine technologies sectors, but higher skilled jobs. So that would mean that it would be possible for persons with university education to return back home and find a good job there. So that might also mean that there will be the labor market will be deeper, and it will be easier for people to return than it has been the case in the last few decades.
Thank you, Svein. There's a couple of follow-up questions regarding this. The first one is actually by Steve Moyes. He is wondering whether in Iceland, if the technology startups have been actively working in the fishing and aquaculture sectors, and if so, what type of technology startups?
I think definitely we have seen technology startups, but I think I would like my colleague Thor Sigfússon, who is chairing the Iceland cluster, ocean cluster. He is giving a speech just later on, but that he might have more knowledge on precisely that. But what we have seen is things in the startups. Well, there have been all kinds of things of late, but we have seen a lot of interest in of course typical gear and equipment, but also in pharmaceutics and in what's it called again, in the wait 1 second, I'm thinking of in the cosmetics business and in the health industries. So we have seen that kind of technology startups. But like I said, I think I will prefer that Fo Sifuson, who will come on in half an hour, I think, to reply, give a full reply to that.
Okay, thank you, Svein. I'm sorry, but I will have to tell you that we are short on time now. And unfortunately, we don't have time for the other questions. However, we will pick them up at the next panel. And please do keep on engaging. And I also encourage the speakers to answer the questions directly in the Q&A box. And with this, we're now having a short break. We will have a 10-minute break, and then we will continue with our next session on the engine that does not stop. And we will welcome you back in 10. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the speakers, and thank you to the audience for your active participation.
Sorry.
So previously, when we were using spreadsheets, we were heavily
it happened one evening at the playing of ball that I first met lovely Willie, so proper and tall. He was neat, fair and handsome, and straight in every limb. There's a heart in this bosom lies breaking for him. And will you go with me a short piece of the road, for to view my father's dwelling and place of well, he knew by her look and her languishing eye that he was the young man she valued most high. say, and with a sharp rapier he pierced her love through, and the innocent blood of her Willie drew. The grave had been dug and lovely Willie laid in. The mass it was chanted for to cleanse his soul from sin, and it's so honored, Father, you may speak as you will, but the innocent blood of my love you did spill. So I will go off to some foreign country, where I shall know no one, and no one knows me, and there I will wander till I close my eyes in death, all for you, lovely Willie, you're the boy I love best.
How are we for time, Krista?
Hi, Andrew. Yeah, we can get started now. I think that's just about 10 minutes.
Okay. One second. Welcome back, everybody. First of all, I mean, I was very inspired by Charlotte's grouping and the first panel. I think our next speaker, Keith Hutchins, and his group will have they have a high benchmark to reach. I was very, very impressed with this morning's contribution. I think that the whole idea of using, getting more out of less, using the proteins that are there, that nothing goes to waste, and that we have to use technology to create good jobs within coastal communities is something that is something very, very important. And also that the base of all this, and something that Carl said, is the fishing community. It's the fishing community is the bedrock from which everything else builds. And I really liked the presentations that we've seen, and how good they were all around. So I'd like to thank everybody in the morning session, early afternoon session here, but whatever. And I would like to introduce Keith Hutchins to take the second session, The Engine That Does Not Stop, Changing Course Through Innovation and Technology. With that, over to you, Keith, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. And as we go through the last minutes of good morning here on this side of the pond, I'd say good morning, and certainly on the other side, good afternoon to all our friends. I'll echo your comments, Andrew, in regards to a fantastic session. And it's been a high bar that's been set, but I'm sure our group will meet it as we pursue through the very interesting topics that we'll go through. So I'm Keith Hutchins. I'm Managing Director of the Canadian Centre for Fisheries Innovation. So we're often called a conduit to industry. We connect institutional knowledge and experts to solve problems in the wild capture and the aquaculture industry. That could be in research, technology, advancement, science, or a whole range of areas that we would have a vision for. And our vision we see is a seafood industry that integrates the latest technology and sustainability and profitability of the industry, and look to certainly enable the leading knowledge and research, innovation and technology in the seafood industry. So that's kind of a focus where we're to, and certainly the Laurentic Forum and some of the topics we talk about certainly connect right into that, and it's exciting to be part of it, and to thank the Laurentic Forum for inviting CCFI to be a part of it. Just for me personally, in terms of my career, I spent about a decade in the workers' compensation, occupational health and safety areas, dealing a lot in the areas of the fishery, certainly processing in the harvesting sector. Also consulted at my own business related to that industry. Spent 10 years in elected office here in Newfoundland and Labrador, served in a couple of portfolios very relevant to our discussion. Minister of Innovation, Business and Rural Development, Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture, and Minister of Municipal and Intergovernmental Affairs. So certainly had a broad spectrum of operations for this province, for Canada, and also had an opportunity to visit Iceland and Norway and other regions, and certainly get an understanding and experience and knowledge of activities in those regions again. So we have the engine that does not stop, changing course to innovation and technology. And through this session, we'll be looking at the role of innovation and technology in the blue economy. We have an array of speakers from all our jurisdictions this morning. We have Dr. Paul Winger. Paul is Director, Center for Sustainable Aquaculture Resources with the Fisheries and Marine Institute at Memorial University here in St. John's. We have Thor Sigfusson, founder and chairman of the Icelandic Ocean Supercluster. We have Joanne Goffney, aquaculture technical manager with the Irish Sea Fisheries Development Agency. We have Paul Arne Bourne, a researcher, Institute of Marine Research in Northern Norway. And as well, we have Ewing Heskevik, who's a fisherman and a regional political representative and from Norway. So we have certainly good representation from all regions. Certainly very tunely topic based on some of the discussions we had earlier this morning in our first session, and certainly looking forward to our speakers. Before we get there, there's just a few things I'll remind you of that Charlotte spoke of earlier before she started her sessions. It's 10 minutes. We asked to keep the 10 minutes. We'll go through each presentation, and then at the end, we'll go through the Q&A and have a very good discussion like occurred after the previous session. So certainly use the question and answer on site, and you can log on any questions there you want. In the chat, we certainly promote discussions because this is all about collaboration and partnerships, and we can continue on after the session as we move off from this session and into future days and weeks of building those partnerships and collaboration. So I think right now we have a couple of videos that show the landscapes of Northwest Ireland and Iceland that we're going to share before we get into our first speaker.
Enough waking up to more bad news. Enough not making new friends or making it to the gym. Enough talking to the walls. Enough with the endless video calls. When was the last time you felt goosebumps? Or had a real date with a person, in person? Enough missing out. It looks like you've had enough. It looks like you need Iceland.
The kids have been everywhere. Orlando, Spain, France, the Canary Islands, but I've never taken them on a proper Irish holiday. They think adventure is somewhere you go on a plane. That there's nothing exotic in Ireland. That magic happens in other countries. That you can't have a beach day in Ireland. It's time to show them that the best adventures start on our own doorstep in Donegal.
Well, thank you very much. That was certainly amazing landscape and picturesque in terms of those two regions. And congratulations to those jurisdictions put them together. It's a great insight to some great areas and of some of the partners we're certainly experienced today. So thanks very much for that. So with that, we'll begin. I'll go to Dr. Paul Winger, who will be our first speaker. Paul.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is my first appearance and participation in the Laurentic Forum, so I'm very pleased to be here. Greetings from Eastern Canada. I've been asked to speak for the next few minutes on innovation in our snow crab fishery. Next slide, please. So the title is Innovation in Harvesting Technology in Canada's Snow Crab Fishery. Again, welcome from the Fisheries and Marine Institute. We are a campus of Memorial University, which is Atlantic Canada's largest university and the only university actually in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Next slide. So we're located obviously here on the easternmost province of Canada. And as I said, I come to you from Memorial University. And one particular campus, which you can see here in the photo, which is known as the Fisheries and Marine Institute. It is the university's portal to the ocean. It is an academic institute, an educational institute from diplomas to degrees, laddering through everything from one-year diplomas all the way up to PhDs. And there are a number of research centers. So I am a director of a particular center known as the Center for Sustainable Aquatic Resources. It's one of many in the value chain within our institute. We have several institutes that focus on, or several centers that focus on different parts of the value chain. My particular center focuses on the harvesting side. If you're interested in before harvesting or after or post harvesting, we have centers that we could introduce you to. At the heart, I guess I'm an academic, I'm a researcher, but everything we do in my center is industrially related. Every project has an industry partner putting cash into the project. So it's meaningful, relevant, applied R&D. Next slide. One of the species we've been working on for a number of years is snow crab. Obviously, as Iris Petton mentioned earlier today in her presentation, it is the most important fishery for Atlantic Canada, for Newfoundland in particular. It really is the fishery that pays the mortgage for your car or for your house, and pays the bills in the smallest communities and keeps the lights on in all of our small communities all around the island. Next slide, please. So how do we catch snow crab? So this talk is on innovation in fishing technology. If you're interested in all the journal papers and peer-reviewed science, I'd happy to be able to share that with you. A storytelling presentation with a few pictures. And well, let's first of all just start out with the typical Newfoundland snow crab pot. It's conical, it's covered in mesh, it's a trap. We hang bait in the middle, and snow crab need to be available. They need to be vulnerable. They encounter the odor plume and they walk towards the trap. They march up the side of the trap and fall down through the top of the trap. And then if you're too big, well, if you're legal sized, you stay. If you're small, you do have the opportunity to walk out through the side of the trap. Next slide, please. So how do we fish the trap? Well, it really depends on the size of your enterprise, the size of your vessel. If I haven't mentioned it already, we have about 3,000 licenses around the island, catching about 30,000 tons. All in all, it adds up to about 2.5 million trap hauls. And how do we do that? Here is how the typical gear is fished. We don't fish them singly, we fish them in fleets. Smaller vessels that might be in the 35 to 45 foot range, coastal boats would fish maybe 25 to 40 pots in a row. Larger vessels getting upwards of 65 feet in length that can go greater distances, even out past 200 miles outside our EEZ, would fish maybe 200 pots in a fleet. Next slide. Right, so what are some of the innovations? Well, some of the innovations that we've worked on in the last few years have really responded to some pain points in the industry. And we've partnered with Canadian Centre for Fisheries Innovation, who you've already met, Keith Hutchings, a moment ago, and of course, industry. And some of the questions we've been answering. This picture shows you several projects were focused on something we call size selectivity. So if everything enters the trap, how do you get rid of the small snow crab? Well, you can wait 1, 2, 3, 4 days after the trap bait has depleted. Small crab will leave, and they tend to walk out through the sides of the traps. It's the only way to leave. But interestingly, in Canada, we regulate the mesh size, but we don't regulate the hanging ratio or how the mesh is hung on the trap. So if you go from harbor to harbor, to port, and you look at all these crab pots, what you'll notice is a fair degree of variability in the actual shape of the diamond around those lower panels of the trap. It creates a fuzzy size selectivity process. Thankfully, we have a rigid animal. And so we asked the question, could we use a rigid selectivity device, something that is put in the side of the trap? And this is quite common in crustacean fisheries around the world, is to have some kind of escape mechanism or escape gap. And that's all this is. And we took a fair bit of time to develop it. And sure enough, our federal government validated the research. It is a legal modification to the snow crab trap. It's not mandatory, but it is a legal condition of license if harvesters wish to use it. Next slide. Sticking with this topic of size selectivity, how do we avoid bringing small crab to the surface? Well, one way is to help them get out, and we just talked about that. Another way is to prevent them from getting into the trap. And so, yes, we've experimented with small mesh traps that nothing can get in through the side. Everything has to go up over the top, and creating barriers so that small crab just don't have the arm span to reach over the barrier. It worked pretty good, actually, but here's the downside. If a small crab does get in, it's not getting out. And sure enough, we found small, really small female crab inside the trap, which we still cannot explain to this day, other than maybe they were carried in by larger males, which can happen. So this trap innovation was interesting. It was an academic exercise, but it has not been adopted or legalized, and you won't see it in action, but an interesting story nonetheless. Next slide. Well, let's talk about ghost fishing, another ecological impact. We've talked about size selectivity, but there's also ghost fishing. These are steel traps covered with plastic netting, and if the trap is lost, it will continue to fish. And scientific evidence has shown that if a trap is lost, it will continue to fish, ghost fish. And the crab that crawled in after the bait, and if they get stuck and the bait depletes, they become the bait. And over and over and over, a trap will self-bait, and 10 years later, you can haul a crab hot to the surface, and it's still got live, fresh crab in it. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid this destructive influence? Well, biodegradable twine is another area of research that we had focused on. And what you see here is a simple cotton fiber. Yes, we looked at sisal, hemp, jute, and cotton. And harvesters really liked this particular twine. It will last the season. It's rugged enough to tie in and work with. It won't rot within a season, but if you lose that trap, it will rot at a predictable rate and eventually disable the trap. Our federal government jumped on this research, and it's now a mandatory requirement in all traps around the island. Next slide. Well, here's an interesting story. So we also asked the question, if a trap can be size selective and it can anti-ghost fish, these are great. But what about just general longevity of a trap? Because traps tend to rust out. They're only made of steel covered with some plastic netting. And what you see here is a PVC coated wire crimped and bent into a conical shape. It wasn't easy. It took a lot of effort to figure out how to do this. This trap will last forever. It literally will not rust out. But interestingly, this trap has not been legalized. And the main reason is our federal regulations regulate a diamond mesh netting. And this is not diamond. It never could be diamond. We can't even make it diamond. And so this trap, although it was very interesting in terms of some innovation, it wasn't regulated and also ended up in the graveyard of great ideas that were never uptaken. Next slide. Well, I'd also like to talk to you about increasing catch per unit effort, and that's not a bad thing. Canada's fisheries are mostly output controlled with IQs, and so harvesters are encouraged to be efficient. They have a certain amount of quota, and if they can catch it in fewer trips and fewer days on the water, then that's a good thing. So a large area of research that we focused on is simply improving efficiency. How do we get more snow crab per unit of effort or per trap haul? And we stumbled into this area of artificial stimuli. So in addition to bait, what else can you put in a trap that will encourage snow crab to enter? And we've been playing around with light. We've been playing around with acoustic lures. Well, here's a picture of a trap with an artificial light in the trap. And we know that snow crab we can actually increase by upwards of 30, 40, and 50% increase the catch per unit effort. And this has been shown on both sides of the Atlantic. And now we have Norwegian research scientists verifying and have recently published the same findings in the Barents Sea. And so simply hanging a light in a trap can increase catch per unit effort. And we don't know why. If you're wondering why, we still have not figured that out. We don't know if crab are simply attracted to the light, or perhaps they're attracted to something that's attracted to the light. Or perhaps it simply helps them climb a structure in a deep, dark environment because this fishery is in about 300 meters of water. So it's a barren, dark landscape. Or possibly the animal is just shelter happy. We know that some crustaceans, like lobster, just simply love to hide in shelter. And so we may just be illuminating the shelter. So all possibilities, but one thing we do know, hanging a light in a trap will increase the catch per unit effort. But Lights include batteries. They have a fair bit of plastic associated with them, and they can be expensive. This particular light here, you can buy it from a company in the US for about $50. But is there a cheaper solution? And so I'd like to also tell you about another trap. Next slide. So the traditional trap is on the left, and then we have this trap on the right. And you might be thinking, well, it just looks like green twine. Well, this is deep and dark. A fishery crab can't really detect, probably won't see the difference between orange and green anyways, but there's something unique about this trap, which I haven't told you about. Next slide. This trap glows in the dark, which is remarkable. This is a type of netting which is available through a Portuguese netting company, and it was a Newfoundland company here in St. John's that brought that netting here, put it on some traps, and we've been partnering with them to do some R&D and actually test whether it can increase the catch per unit effort, and we found that it certainly does. So a glow-in-the-dark trap certainly is an interesting innovation. But it doesn't involve batteries. It doesn't involve any extra plastic, no extra work on the part of the harvester other than not retrieving your pots at night. So sometime during the day when there's enough UV light from the sun to excite the fiber in the netting, less than a minute, less than 30 seconds, just moving the pot around the back of the boat, emptying the catch, and getting it back over the side is enough to re-energize the trap and get it back over the side. And so we've been doing a series of projects with harvesters around the island, testing this trap as well. It's our latest and most exciting innovation. Next slide. So let me just say thank you for listening to some pictures. It was a nice chance to do some storytelling, tell you about some innovation in our snow crab fishery. We couldn't do it without all the valuable partners along the way, including CCFI, the university, various funders, and the fishing industry. And of course, if I didn't mention it, the university doesn't own any fishing vessels. All of the R&D that we do is done on commercial industry platforms in collaboration. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks very much. And some very interesting research and that's been done and certainly ongoing that you've completed. And I'm sure we'll have some questions later in our Q&A session. So thanks very much. Right now, we're going to go to Iceland, Thor Sigfusson, who's the founder and chairman of the Icelandic Ocean Cluster. Thor.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great to be with you. Paul, I must tell you from the last speech, it was quite inspiring for us here in Iceland, actually. The fact is that we're now seeing suddenly stone crab, guess due to global warming, a lot of stone crab in Iceland. And that means that we need to learn things. And so it just shows us how important it is for us to talk together in these coastal communities around. Our specialty here in Iceland has been seafood, whitefish, mainly pelagic, as Professor Ragnarsson described. What I would like to talk to you about is what we call the incredible fish value machine in Iceland. This means basically that what we've been looking at in the global perspective is that a lot of nations, sadly, many countries around us, tend to throw away a large part of the fish that's caught. And on average, we see quite often the numbers between 40 to 50% at least that's thrown away. In some countries, and many countries actually, this is defined as waste. We don't look at any of the parts of the fish as waste. We see byproducts, valuable byproducts. And rather than having these numbers using 50 to 60% of the fish like many other nations, Icelanders are close to 90% of usage of the whitefish in Iceland. And I want to go through it, why this is and how we might actually be able to bring this mindset, I would say, into our neighboring countries as well, into coastal communities. There are challenges definitely, but there are opportunities as well. I think one of the most important part here is basically mindset, and it's kind of tough to realize that. But the fact is, you have to have an industry that is interested in using more of the fish, an industry that has been learning about the opportunities, and that's basically our role, especially with the work that we're doing at this conference and in clusters like mine, the Iceland Ocean Cluster, is to just tell the stories about what we can do with the byproducts of the fish, and use that as an example for other nations and for other communities to tackle that issue. Of course, this has very much to do with trust. We need to have an industry that is open for new ideas, that is open to the dialogue with researchers, open to dialogue with universities, with the startup world. And that is, of course, a challenge, because we find often in these natural resource industries that these are industries that tend to keep a little bit their resources for themselves, and therefore their knowledge for themselves. And this is due to the fact that these are limited resources. But the fact is also, as more and more we move up this value line with these amazing resources of the ocean, we realize these are not the typical natural resources. These are resources that need the knowledge from all over to develop further. And that is what Iceland has been doing. We've been successfully with the Iceland Ocean Cluster, connecting people, connecting industries. And I think that's basically what we're hearing from our cluster friends in Ireland as well. The biggest challenge for all of us in the cluster field is to be the matchmakers to connect these different parts. And what we felt since we started with the Iceland Ocean Cluster in 2011 is that there were some missing elements within that space, the ocean space. Probably the biggest missing element was the startup phase, the startup field. Not many startups were in this area when we started the cluster. Of course, there's been in the past very many examples, but we were able to at least make sure that this would become more of a talk of the town, the opportunities that we found in the blue economy. And by connecting the startups a little bit further with the research that's done in Iceland, with the research institutions, the universities as well, the students that came from the universities into this space with the industry, we were able to find ways to create this vehicle of a dynamic vehicle of new opportunities being utilized. And I think this is what we need to see happen in many coastal communities. And given the examples where we come from, we can honestly say that the size makes a difference, of course. I mean, in that sense that the difficulty is the greatest with the absolute smallest communities. But if communities work together, and if there is an interest from the industry, which is of course the big thing here, we can see, like in Iceland, coastal communities grow in terms of small companies that are developing all kinds of products from the byproducts of seafood. And once again, we have the examples. Professor Ragnarsson mentioned some of them. One of the best one is, of course, Kerecis, which is developing amazing medical product from the fish skin. They're actually now with jobs for 140 people, but they're only using fish skin from probably one boat in Iceland. And that is enough to create a company now that is one of the most valuable companies in the ocean space in Iceland. Started in some 12, 14 years ago and has since become a giant in that field, established in the west shores of Iceland. Of course, it is now very global, but at least it started in a close collaboration between researchers and a fishing company in Iceland. And we can have more examples of that. I know the challenge will be that we have smaller quantities of some of these raw materials. But if they're brought to shore at a certain quality, we can have a small leather manufacturing, fish leather manufacturing, small fish meal plants. We can develop various products in coastal communities that can create new jobs. And what has been probably the most enjoyable for me here in the Iceland Ocean Cluster is sometimes that I hear from our sister clusters. We have now 5 sister clusters in the US, stories where we find that the children of the fishermen are actually returning to their coastal villages due to the fact that they had plans to go away to create something new in different areas. They were studying marketing, research, doing some biochemistry, whatever. But suddenly when they were sort of shown the opportunities that might be in some of these proteins of the oceans in the fishing, they are actually coming back. And probably one of the best examples now is in Maine, where, of course, in Portland, Maine, we have a cluster there. We're seeing now companies developing beauty products from the lobster shells. We could go to other countries as well to show similar examples, but one of the key here is we need to show people sort of the success stories when we are able to bring together these different elements of the value chain, whether it is the researcher, the academic, the marketing people, the fishermen. If we can bring them together to take a dialogue on this issue, suddenly we find new value being created. What I think, and it's part of the question that was brought to Professor Arnarsson, and I wanted to answer here. The question was basically, what is it that, what's new, what's happening right now in Iceland? And I think what is kind of amazing that when we have this now community, which we call the Iceland Ocean Cluster and the Ocean Cluster House, we suddenly find that we're becoming the magnet. And we are not really the magnet. Doesn't mean that we're really picking the winners. We're actually just becoming the magnet, so people come and have a space here for developing their own ideas. And what we find from the young generation now is that they are very much into seaweed. So we have now already in the Ocean Cluster House in Reykjavik 4 companies that are developing all kinds of amazing products from seaweed. We have a lot of interest in the green tech in the ocean. Paul mentioned lights, using lights for catching fish. That's one of the ideas that is being developed here. We have also tracking of fish and tracking the ocean environment. So what we see so strongly now is that the new generation is coming with a completely different skill sets and interest from what we learned maybe only 10, 15 years ago. And this shows how important it is for us to have these clusters to become the sort of bed for good ideas, for people to have a community where they can meet and talk. Sometimes I'm asked what is the most important element of what we call the Ocean Cluster House in Iceland, and I've said especially the coffee machines, because people tend to be meeting in these spaces of ours, and so it's not very good it's not necessary for the cluster manager to be always in the middle. There can be just a coffee machine that helps us to develop these relations that need to be built on trust. So we see lots of opportunities in the blue economy in coastal areas around us, but we need to emphasize the importance of collaborating, the importance of the cluster work, which I'm so glad to hear from Ireland and of course from the Canadian side. There are lots of things happening all around the Atlantic as well. So we have lots of opportunities, but what I would like to see actually as well is the possibility for us to collaborate even further with other clusters and other interested parties to build further these knowledge networks that need to be built if we're going to find ways to create value for these economies in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Thor. Thanks very much for your presentation, and very interesting related to your final comments related to the collaboration that's needed between jurisdictions, continued collaboration, I guess, on issues that you suggested, certainly on the issue of full utilization and success stories that have been had, and how we can transfer that or adopt that knowledge in other jurisdictions in terms of adding value, certainly to coastal communities and coastal regions. So we'll move on now to Joanne Gaffney, who's with the Irish Sea Fisheries Development Agency. She's the technical manager in the aquaculture division. So Joanne, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're good.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Krista. Can we go to my first slide, please? Hi. So my name is Joanne Gaffney. I'm the Aquaculture Technical Manager with Bord Iascaigh Mhara, or for those of you who haven't heard of us before, the Irish Seafood Development Agency. We're an agency that helps develop the seafood industry in Ireland, providing technical expertise, business supports, funding, training, and also promoting responsible environmental practice. We have a range of teams across the whole seafood sector that focus on fishery development, aquaculture development, processing, environmental performance, certification services, data, and training. From my perspective, as the Aquaculture Technical Manager, one of the key parts of my role is to look at new technologies and techniques that are available elsewhere in the world that have the capacity to improve productivity and the environmental performance of the Irish sector, to bring those technologies in, to demonstrate them and to de-risk them for the Irish industry. So next slide, please, Krista. When we're talking about the Irish seafood industry, what are we talking about? So I think we're missing a slide there, but the Minister covered it. The value of the seafood industry is about 1 billion. Aquaculture in Ireland contributes about 180 million direct value every year. We're talking about 309 aquaculture operators spread around the island. And the main species that are grown is salmon. Here's a picture, Krista, next slide. Oysters, and again, next slide, please, Krista. And mussel farming. And the value breakdown of that is on our next slide. So about, as you can see, salmon is our most valuable aquaculture product, oysters coming second, and then rope mussels and seabed cultured mussels. Interestingly, oyster value and volume has increased significantly over the last number of years and has become a much more important export product for the Irish sector, principally through value adding and rather than innovations in techniques necessarily, but innovations in markets, innovation in branding, which has facilitated the expansion of that sector. So I thought it was of value today to kind of give an overview to everyone on where Ireland sits with regard to our innovation framework and our innovation policy and where we see innovation playing a role in the coming years. So the government recently published the Food Vision 2030 strategy, which is a new 10-year strategy for the Irish agri-food sector. This covers all food production, covers forestry, it covers equine, but in there is fisheries, aquaculture, and fish processing. In that document, it's the vision that Ireland will become a world leader in sustainable food systems over the next decade, which will deliver significant benefits for the Irish agri-food sector itself, but also have wider positive impacts for Irish society and the environment. There's a key focus in that document on sustainability, but the three-legged stool of sustainability. So economic sustainability, environmental, and social sustainability. And it's seen that if we can balance those key sustainability criteria, we'll have a basis for the future competitive advantage of our agri-food sector. The strategy itself is wide-ranging. It consists of 23 goals grouped into high-level missions. But I suppose the 4 high-level missions that we'll call out is a climate-smart, environmentally sustainable sector, viable and resilient primary producers with enhanced well-being, producing food which is safe, nutritious, appealing, trusted and valued at home and abroad, and of relevance to this talk, an innovative, competitive and resilient food sector driven by technology and talent. taking that theme of innovation, technology, talent, I've just highlighted some of the text here from the document. Talking about innovation will be of critical importance to deal with challenges of environmentally sustainability and resilience. There's an ambition to attract global investment in aquaculture technology and promote Ireland as a knowledge base. And I think, interestingly, following on from the previous discussions about innovation working with industry, there is now a recognition that innovation policy should be challenge orientated. It must be end-to-end in scope, and it must link primary producers, intermediary processors, brand owners, consumer concerns to be able to fully drive sustainable growth. I think it's worth highlighting here that BIM have been actively involved in trying to link up those primary producers, research people to challenge and to identify where new technologies are of relevance to the sector. And it's worth highlighting the Irish Aquaculture Technology and Innovation Platform, which is a multi-stakeholder platform that facilitates the exchange of information and supports knowledge transfer to the aquaculture sector. So even though we have a new policy, it's heartening to see that we were already on the right track and we were looking at the correct initiatives already. Next slide, please, Krista. National policy can't be viewed in absence of EU policy, principally because a lot of funding that's available to our industry and to even ourselves as state agencies is coming through EU funding. Principally, it's going to be under the new European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, the new MFAF, which will start next year. Where that funding will be targeted for aquaculture has really been driven by the recently launched new strategic guidelines from aquaculture that were published, I think in April this year. I could be wrong. It could have come out in May, actually, I see there, in May this year, and that came from the EU. Again, this mirrors actually our national policy and looks at developing an aquaculture sector that's going to supply nutritious, healthy food with a low environmental and climate footprint, while also a sector that creates economic opportunities and jobs. And in particular, again, this guidelines focus on building resilience and competitive in EU aquaculture, ensuring the participation of the EU aquaculture sector in the green transition, fostering social acceptance of EU aquaculture, and providing better consumer information, and again, increasing knowledge and innovation in the EU aquaculture sector. A key part of these strategic guidelines is the requirement that all member states must prepare a new strategic plan for aquaculture. The plans should broadly mirror that which is suggested in the strategic guidelines, while also addressing country-specific issues. BIM are currently preparing this plan on behalf of our parent department, DAFM, Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, and we're hoping to be in a position to go for public consultation on the draft plan, associated strategic environmental assessment and Natura assessment before the end of this year. Some of the key innovation requirements we expect to appear in that plan are continued research into production technology and production systems to improve productivity, improve environmental performance. And key to that will be engineering and digital capabilities. We're also looking at aquaculture genetics, genetic selection of species to, I suppose, select for features such as climate change resilience, disease resistance, and consumer preferences. Also, when we're talking about climate change, and especially in the Irish situation, and I suppose mirrored by all colleagues here, we're expecting to see an increased severity and frequency of storms, and also warming waters, which may affect the day-to-day operations and the profitability of fish farms. So using technology and innovation to focus on forecasting, early warning, mitigation measures, we see that as imperative. Also, as mentioned by the Minister this morning, the Climate Action Plan places a decarbonisation obligation on all sectors, and why by 2030 we're seeking to reduce carbon emissions by a minimum of 30%. Seafood businesses in general and aquaculture are at a low base there. We don't have the same sort of carbon outputs as other food protein sources. However, there is an obligation on all sectors to play their part. So that is also going to be a key focus over the next 10 years. This type of innovation and knowledge transfer really will involve applied research. So I just want to quickly highlight the EU Horizon Europe program that's launched at the same time. So this program is the EU's key funding program for research and innovation. It's got a budget over the funding period, the next 10 years, of 95.5 billion. So it's definitely a large fund. It's ambitious in what it hopes to achieve. Excuse me. And it's seeking to tackle climate change, reach the EU's sustainable development goals, and also really support the green transition. Research in aquaculture and innovation in aquaculture has an important part to play in this. It's been highlighted as a priority by the EU. And they're highlighting that decisive action for aquaculture is required to ensure that research and innovation responds faster to the current and future challenges and opportunities for the sector, avoids duplications of efforts, and creates synergies. In particular, there's a focus on developing innovation clusters, combining research across the value chain, and improving dissemination of research. So there's a lot of ambition, there's a lot of supports there. So just to finish up my presentation, I wanted to highlight we're not coming from a standing start. So next slide, please, Krista. So within my team, before I joined and since joining, we've had a key focus on looking at technologies of relevance to the aquaculture sector. Highlighted here are just some pictures of some of the initiatives we worked on over the last number of years. For the salmon sector, we've looked at ways of transporting freshwater to salmon farms for environmentally benign treatments, such as the tow bag there, which transports freshwater in a safe manner rather than inside a vessel, which can cause instability. We've looked at different mechanisms to treat fish, such as inflatable tarps, that they can be subject to freshwater treatment. We've looked at developing closed containment systems for fish when they first go to sea, utilizing UV treatment of the water to give the smolts the greatest opportunities for survival, and also looking at alternative energy systems to drive these systems in the offshore environment. So utilizing photovoltaic and wind energy to supplement normal traditional diesel generation on these sites. Another program that we've looked at as well, it's run by a colleague of mine, but I thought it was worth mentioning, is the BIM Aquaculture Accelerator Program. This looks at assisting startups in Ireland on the path to growth and scale. And we're trying to reach out and work with companies in different disciplines, with those such as those with backgrounds in artificial intelligence and other tech, and asking them to look at aquaculture as a key market for them and to bring their businesses forward to support the aquaculture industry. So trying to develop an aqua tech industry within Ireland of benefit to the wider sector. And this program is run by a company called Hatch, and again is supported by the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund. The track record of that program in Ireland to date, we've had innovation studios in 2018 to 2021. We've had 36 participant projects or participant companies that have been drawn from Ireland's research centres, universities, as well as private companies. That has facilitated significant investments into those companies in Ireland and has led to job creation. And also, just as my final slide, so that I'm not completely ignoring fisheries, my colleague Ronan Brown in the fisheries technical unit has a key program of works to look at fishing gear and looking at innovations in fishing gear design and testing to reduce the impacts of gear on the seabed, to look at carbon efficiency, if you can reduce drag, the carbon efficiency of fishing vessels, and also around, from a biodiversity perspective, about gear design that will, satisfy the international suite of agreements with regard to the landing obligations. So this is just some work we were doing recently, or he was doing recently, at using technology. So using technology, side scan sonar technology that we typically use for benthic assessments, using that to examine the efficiency of gear in real time, allowing skippers to see the performance of their gear, to make changes, to assess that again, and just using technology to further develop this type of work. The link is there on the slide to that work, because I am not the expert on it. So thank you very much, everyone. That's just a whistle-stop tour of where BIM are looking with regard to innovation in aquaculture and fisheries, and also the enabling infrastructure that's been created by the EU and our national government to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne, and a very detailed presentation in regards to BIM and the organization's efforts in strategic goals and identifying those guidelines from policy directive and how they're so integrated. I think there's a lot to be learned there, and certainly a great presentation in regards to the details. So thank you very much. We're going to move now to Northern Norway. We have Paul Arne Borges and Ewing Keskevik. Paul Arne is with the Institute of Marine Research in Northern Norway, and Ewing is with, he's a fisherman and regional political representative. So certainly looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, hello. It's Ewing here from Norway. I see that you can't see a picture of me. I'm not.
Yep, we can hear you. We can
being
see.
Able to fix that. You can hear me. So I will just go over to my presentation.
Yep.
I will start thanking you by having the opportunity to participate in this conference. I am a fisherman and a politician in North Norway. I have been working with technology most of my life, though recently I've been working with shrimp pots that I've got from Nova Scotia and changed them to be suitable for the Norwegian fisheries. But I will mainly focus on how I look at technology, the fishing, and how it impacts the societies in Norway. The technology is making a lot of new opportunities, and it's as other participators have told us, Svein Agnarsson and Johan Gaffney, it gives a lot of opportunities to make jobs. One of the problems or with the new technology that we see in Norway is the first thing we work with as fishermen and is the higher efficiency. We want higher efficiency when we go on sea to make the fish come cheaper and faster on land. That of course reduce the labors that is used for catching the fish, which again is a problem for the small societies along the coastline. And this is a new changing of technology that we can't stop, we won't stop it, and it has to be there. On the other hand, we see all the other opportunities it gives on using new raw materials, catching other species that has not been available before, deeper water, new areas. But the less, what we can do in the politic for changing the technology to be to give the local society more left is that we have to put more of the technology into the environmental work. You know, always when we have the technology that reduce the effort, the impact on the nature can give more resources back to the societies. Iceland is a good example with a 16% quote bonus for fish caught on long lines instead of on nets. Nets is a technology that make more fish. We have the nets standing in the sea, left behind that fish after they've been lefting. We have fish that's landed with less value because of the quality. Politics can be used to invent technology that's give more work and more values to the society, local society especially. Another example that I've been trying to work with is that the carbon taxes on marine fuels is very low. It's an example where most fishermen want this. The local society thinks it's a good thing for them because their fishermen come up with cheap fuel. What we see is that bigger boats are going further away to catch the fish, and bigger boats are going further away to land the fish. Which the result of this is that it's not environmentally good because of the high use of fuel, and it's not good for the local society because of the low use of labor. So raising the tax of some marine fuels will event that boats prefer to fish coastal, they prefer to land coastal, and they would use more of their efforts on labor and less of fuel. So there is in politics and technology has to be closely related when we want to make the best value and the most nature preventing harvesting technology. I will also say that a big issue in Norway is how to react on the new species that has been arriving. There's been talking about the king crabs and the high value. I think the price of a king crab now is landing for the fisherman is around $50 per kilo, and it's an enormous importance of the local societies where I live in North Norway. The king crabs is fished very coastal, and it's give the smaller vessel a big part of the income. Although it has a big negative effect on the nature, because it's a new species and it's infect other species. So how we should handle the king crabs is something we have to agree on, and we have to focus in the scientists to see how big the negative effects are on the king crab, and if there is actually something that eventually will be there in the long term, and we could already accept them today, or we should try to extend them. The humpback salmon is the newest effect we have in North Norway. It has been this summer filling the news every day, all the time. The humpback salmon was not put there from Norway. It's a Russian, put in the Russian river, and has now spread to Norway. So we stand in the difficult situation. Should we see this as an opportunity for the local society to create new jobs, to create new values, and harvest it, or should we try to extend it? These questions and the technology that comes along with it is really important to have an open mind in, I think. And yes, and I sorry, my English is not very good, so yeah, I think I'll let it be with that if that's okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ewing. That was very good, practical, knowledge of activities and the challenges in terms of technology and higher efficiency and the coastal delivery of harvesting offshore, and also politics and industry and the interrelationship there, and being cognizant of that. So thank you very much for that. And I think Paul Arney is going to go next.
Yes, maybe you can get the slides back again. My name is Paul. You can go to the first one, please. I'm a researcher at Institute of Marine Research in Norway, and have for the last 20 years been working on Arctic aquaculture interactions, some innovations also. So this will be a presentation more from the scientific and the managemental point of view. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, however, 14 years ago, I was working in a small fjord in the northernmost county of Norway, Finnmark. And at that time, it was a small-scale saithe and cod fishery, very close to the salmon farms. Since then, the fishermen has grown fewer, the boats has become larger, and a lot of the valuable cod fishery is done earlier in the season and in more open coastal waters. At the same time, the North Norwegian aquaculture industry has grown tremendously. Also with some changes, but mostly still in net pens, maybe at bigger localities, and maybe moving a bit more towards open oceans and coastal waters as well. We expect in the future that the salmon farming, which will be the main driver in northern Norway, will be net pen based, but it will also probably be a small diversification towards closed pens or semi-closed pens, and even land-based fish farms. At the same time, there is also a lot of other stakeholders entering coastal waters in the north. Towards the Russian border, for example, wind power plants, fisheries, and aquaculture are interested in the same waters. And if we look even further into the future, we might get more dramatic climatic changes, and also maybe a coastline far north, less populated. Next slide, please. Yes. IMR is one of the largest marine institutes in Europe. We are owned by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries, and we are situated all along the coast, from our main office in Bergen and to the locality here up in the far north in Tromsø. And of course, we have to be aware of all these changes when we develop our scientific programs and our advice to the ministry. Especially, we must be aware that the Norwegian capture-based fisheries are steady or maybe slightly decreasing. But as I said, the aquaculture industry are increasing tremendously. And even though most of the salmon farming are still net pen based, it doesn't mean that it isn't without innovations. In fact, it's been a lot of innovation during the last 20 years. And of course, that means that managemental advice and regulations also have to be innovative. For example, the newly implemented traffic light system in Norway which regulate the growth of the fish farming industry based on sustainability indicators. That's really the first effort to try to regulate the industry based on what we think nature can tolerate. So that's one innovations. Another thing is that we are investing a lot into new technology, for example, autonomic underwater vessels, to be able to cover the coast on our cruises in a more efficient ways. We're also providing the public to current models, which enables them to model their own localities. And we are trying to include citizen science, for example, in the new Havfund, which is really finding at sea, and a web-based page where people can report in their findings. Next slide, please. Overall, however, because of the traffic light system, which facilitate growth in the northern part of Norway, we have also to increase our activity up north. Also because when the farming industry is going into these areas, they are also going into areas of great values for natural resources. We are trying to build up a model area up in the far north, and we are working both with salmonids, with cod, with shrimps in that area. Also using new technology, for example, the Canadian GPS positioning system, which enables us to tag cod and follow individual fish during year and between years. And also to connect that to state-of-the-art current models, which we are developing, and also detailed seafloor mapping. In the future, we will also hope to include the new technology, for example, the underwater vehicles, and also social citizen sciences, for example, to recapture tagged fish in such a way that we can achieve the main goal, which is to give innovative and better advice on Arctic aquaculture interactions in a more longer run, maybe even integrated ecosystem assessment, also including stakeholders and societies, so that we all together can develop a sustainable fish farming industry in the north, alongside wild resources. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Again, a very good presentation and very interesting related to ecosystem assessment and the integration of new technology and how we regulate industries. Certainly the aquaculture industry you mentioned, and sustainability. So a lot of good information there. Thank you for the presentation. Folks, we're very close to end of time, but we do have a couple of questions. I thought we'd maybe go to those couple of questions before we clue up. There's one question here, Joanne, related to your presentation. You talked about a prediction of Irish aquaculture revenue in 2030. Just some idea on what your expectation about Irish employment in aquaculture in 2030 or so, and what proportion of those forecasted jobs, what you think that may be for coastal communities as you move forward.
Yeah, it's funny, actually, we've been having this conversation about indicators as we're looking at the new National Strategic Plan. And the last time around, all EU member states provided targets in terms of volume and employment. And it was largely unsuccessful, if we're honest, due to the stagnation of the sector within the EU. And this time around, they're looking on different outputs and environmental projects, jobs maintained, community projects supported. So we don't have targets at this time. It's a conversation that's ongoing as we develop our new national strategic plan. But I really don't have an answer to that question at this time.
Okay, thanks very much. And that's, yeah, I mean, it's ongoing, and try to adapt those numbers and look into the future is no doubt a little challenging to do. We also have a question here in regards to Ireland and looking at blockchain, this associated technologies and supply chains, and analysis of the journey of the products. and authenticity of data and insights. Is there any, I guess, structured or formalized approach in regard to looking at some of those indicators or thoughts in regards to the industry going forward?
Yeah, that's one of the technologies we have focused on. So BIM has had a pilot project looking at utilizing blockchain for one of our fisheries. And one of the key retailers in Ireland, Aldi, have expressed a keen interest in this technology. And one of the pillars of the new National Strategic Plan for Aquaculture is about consumer confidence and blockchain technology, and utilizing that sort of technology to give the consumer more confidence in the source and I suppose the heritage of the product they're eating is one of the key focuses as we move forward. So you will be seeing, when our draft plan comes out, discussions around that technology in aquaculture. And as I said, we've already been trialing that relating to fisheries, and also looking at relating to gear, because with the new extended producer responsibility scheme and the requirement to minimize plastics into the marine environment, can we utilize that technology to track aquaculture gear, be it pots and nets, to ensure that gear is being returned and recycled? So the capacity to use that technology has wide-reaching, applications within the seafood sector.
Indeed, yeah. And looking to any indicators that you determine going forward and can share as we integrate and collaborate moving forward. So with that, I'd like to thank all the presenters. I think it's been a great forum or great session. Just a reminder that the chat session is still there. Certainly reach out if you want to build relationships or move forward and make those links that are so important. So with that, I'll refer back to Andrew to finish up.
Thank you so much, Keith. I think, well, it's very seldom when I really think that the session today was, it was brilliant and it was eye-opening, and I think it gave us all food for thought. And I hope it redoubles our effort to go to the next level and bring meaningful projects out of this that can be of benefit to our coastal communities. As I said before, I was a fisherman, and I remember, years ago when we picked up, large monkfish and threw them over because there was no value on them. And, I hear today about the skins from one boat creating 140 jobs, the skins of fish. We're in a brave new world. We're in a different environment. There is a gap, in my opinion, between in many cases, we have the science on the one hand, and we have the coastal communities and the people living there in the other. And I think we need to work at ways of bridging that gap and bringing the science and the new, within Europe going forward, it's smart villages, smart technology, environmental and biodiversity, and all these issues are being dealt with today in a very pragmatic manner. And it really is heartwarming from my perspective, someone living and loving coastal community life, to hear such fantastic presentations. I suppose there's a lot of people I need to thank. The roundtable, there is a roundtable who look at sharing information, knowledge, and best practice, and how to collaborate on mutual beneficial projects. Such as the Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme, the Atlantic Area Programme, Horizon Europe, which we talked about, etc. I think this conversation today, and hopefully the conversation tomorrow, will redouble our efforts in that area, because I think anybody listening to those presentations today couldn't help but feel the value of the seas uniting and of either side of the Atlantic working together in common purpose for the benefit of our coastal communities. I would like to thank people on the steering committee. People, obviously Don McNeil, Mike Murphy, Ian Lawler, John Andy Boner for the use of his offices today, as well as everything else. Carl Boner, Rosita Mahoney, Dr. Mark White, Dr. Fiona Grant, Margaret Bolton Warburg from Ireland, from Newfoundland and Labrador, Kevin Anderson, Cabot Martin, Keith Hutchins, who was moderator of the second session there. And a special word of thanks to Krista Sweetland for all her technical support and all her help in relation to this. From Norway, we've had great support from Her Excellency Mari Sker, the Norwegian Ambassador to Ireland. From Arne Folleras, the Deputy Norwegian Ambassador to Ireland. From Nil Nielsen, Torrin Cleven, Kendall, Stein Arn Uanas, my pronunciation is probably terrible, but there we go. And from Iceland, Jonas Widerson. To all these, I really want to give a huge thank you. And to Anita Blue here in Letterkenny, who helped me as well. I look forward to tomorrow's session. I think everybody presenting today has, again, put a very high bar for tomorrow. And that's all the better, and it's great. I wish everybody well, and if anybody's going, I wish you a safe journey home, and thank everybody for participating today, and Godspeed. Thank you very much.